I was Ethan's pursuer for 10 years, and he thought I loved him deeply. Because I resembled his white moonlight, he shamelessly humiliated me, taking advantage of my love for him. Even when the car accident happened, his first reaction was to protect his white moonlight, while I broke a leg to protect him. He was left with a scar on his face, and I decided to leave. Why should you be allowed to have your white moonlight while I am not allowed to have mine? He never expected that he was also someone else's substitute. The person I truly loved was Ethan's older brother, Leo. I learned that Ethan was racing with someone on the mountain road, and I hurried to stop him in fear. Boom! As soon as I arrived at the mountain road, I heard the deafening roar of engines. Several motorcycles sped down the winding road, making my heart race with fear. I felt like I was about to jump out of my skin. Ethan! I shouted loudly, looking around, and finally spotted the familiar white motorcycle not far away. What a wild man he is, I truly admire him. Ethan leaned back in his seat, and when he saw me, he frowned. What are you doing here? I heard you were racing here, and I was worried you might get into trouble. I thought to myself, it doesn't matter if someone dies, but I can't let his face get ruined. He glanced at me impatiently. What could happen? You've interrupted my fun, hurry up and leave, or I'll have to rev you up. Ethan, you need to come home with me right now, I said to him very seriously. While they were talking, several other wealthy young men had already gathered at the starting point. Seeing that Ethan hadn't started the engine for a long time, one of them whistled. Hey, Ethan, are you backing down so soon today? Is it because your girlfriend is calling you home? Ethan, who usually cared a lot about his image, was instantly provoked. He took off his helmet and glanced at me. Nina, take my place for a race. If you win, I'll go back with you. I stared at him in shock. He looked at me impatiently. If you don't want to, then get lost. Don't waste my time. His tone was flippant, but I knew he didn't take me seriously at all. So I unfastened his helmet and climbed onto the motorcycle. Then let's get started. The wealthy young men who were good friends were seeing a girl as thick-skinned as me for the first time, and they all climbed onto their motorcycles. Counting down, my heart was in my throat. 3, 2, 1, go. As soon as the number hit 1, several motorcycles shot out like arrows released from a bow. The young masters across from me saw how fast I was running, their eyes wide with disbelief. Damn, this girl is out for our lives. Be careful, don't let her overtake you. They raced like the wind, chasing each other. But alas, my riding skills were truly exceptional, and I quickly left them behind. At first, they thought I was just a blind cat stumbling upon a dead mouse. Even a blind cat can catch a mouse when cornered. But as time went on, they began to lose confidence. Ethan, where did you find this girlfriend of yours who's a suitor? Is she a professional racing driver? How can this girl drive so fast? Is she trying to get herself killed? In the end, I won the race with absolute dominance. When I took off my helmet, they were still staring at me in shock. Well, I won. Can I go home with me now? I asked Ethan with a smile. A flicker of astonishment passed through Ethan's pupils, and it took him a moment to respond. You risked your life for them just to bring me back? Are you crazy? Yes. I smiled nonchalantly. He gritted his teeth. Nina, how long are you going to follow me? He finally started to question me. It makes sense, a normal person would probably go crazy being followed by someone they don't like for 10 years. I looked at his handsome face, my tone as gentle as ever. Ethan, until the end of time. I have been Ethan's pursuer for a full 10 years. He is a well-known wealthy heir in City A, and I am a well-known pursuer in City A. Because I resemble his white moonlight, he shamelessly humiliates me, relying on my love for him. Ethan has a birthmark on his left chest, which is the initial of his white moonlight girlfriend R. When I turned 18, I also got an L on my collarbone. He just doesn't know it. Nina, you really are my dog. You must follow me closely and not let anyone bully your master. He raised his hand and pinched my chin, his tone filled with mockery. Woof woof woof. I barked like a dog twice, amusing the onlookers like a clown. At that moment, a few of his brothers gathered around. "Ethan, your girlfriend is willing to be a dog for you, you should treat her better." I said nothing, just smiled, obediently following behind him. She is indeed obedient. As a pet, it's not the same as a real thing, there's no emotion, I can play with her however I want. When he's in a good mood, I humbly flatter him, buttering him up. When he's in a bad mood, I try to entertain him. I say I love him, and he just laughs at my foolishness. But for his disdain, I find it sweet. After returning home, I made a request, wanting him to spend my 22nd birthday with me this weekend. "Ethan, just consider it, keeping me company, okay?" Usually, he wouldn't agree to such requests at all. This time, he unexpectedly nodded. "All right, seeing how obedient you are, I'll reluctantly agree to your request." Hearing his consent, a happy smile spread across my face. But unexpectedly, on my birthday, his white moonlight returned to the country early. That day, I carefully decorated the birthday scene at home. His original plan was to stay with me. But after receiving a phone call, he hurriedly prepared to go out. I gently tugged at his sleeve. "Ethan, didn't you say you would spend today with me?" He irritably shook off my hand. He said he had urgent matters to attend to and told me to blow out the candles and make a wish first. He asked me to eat first. I refused, saying that I had no one to accompany me and that I had no interest in celebrating my birthday. Later, he got angry and said, "Nina, are you done? Are you going to celebrate or not? If not, then stop bothering me." After saying that, he slammed the door and left. I stared at the birthday decorations in the room, silent for a full minute. Then I put the candles back on, lit them, and started to blow them out. After that, I began to cut the cake and eat it by myself. I ate while crying. Tears fell onto the cream, and in the end, I ate them along with it. Why does the cream taste salty? Not long after, Ethan posted a photo of Rose returning to the country on Facebook. The caption read, "Welcome my little princess back home." Rose said she wanted the latest model of the handbag, but there is only one in the world. This handbag was originally a gift that Ethan and I had agreed he would give me today. In the end, however, it was given to Rose by Ethan instead. It turns out that Rose indeed has a princess temperament. Ethan accompanied her the entire day, never leaving her side. The next morning, I found myself with a nosebleed. But I didn't pay it any mind and continued with my daily pursuit of suitors, feeling dizzy and lightheaded. Ethan invited me to a dinner party at the villa that evening, saying it was Rose's first day back in the country and we must celebrate. The front of the villa was filled with luxury cars. When I arrived by taxi, I felt out of place and even attracted a group of rich kids' laughter. "Who are you? Is this a place you can come to? Hurry up and get lost." They let in all sorts of riffraff. This suitor really is persistent. When Butlerly recognized me, he quickly came over. "Miss Nina, why did you come by taxi?" I smiled slightly. "It's fine, taking a taxi is quite good." Everyone was dressed extravagantly, but I simply wore a long-sleeved shirt today. How shabby, I don't even have a formal dress. They don't even consider their own status, just throwing on some ragged cloth to crash at the villa, not afraid of losing face. Ethan was chatting and laughing with those around him when he turned to see me, frowning slightly. "What are you doing, trying to embarrass yourself here?" He grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away from the crowd's gaze. Suddenly, my nose felt warm, and I started to bleed again. His face instantly turned as cold as ice. "Nina, why are you so disgusting?" At that moment, Rose walked over. She was wearing a white lawn dress and high heels, looking like an elegant princess. She looked me up and down and exaggeratedly asked Ethan, "Ethan, where did this crazy person come from?" Rose said I was crazy, and Ethan didn't refute it. Ethan said I was just a clown, here to entertain them. The people present burst into laughter, and even Butlerly awkwardly turned his face away. I randomly wiped my hands a couple of times. Rose looked at me with disdain and asked, "Are you sick or something?" A flicker of displeasure crossed Ethan's stern face. "Why don't you hurry up and go wash yourself? It's really disgusting. In the end that day, I was not driven away. Nina, don't you like playing dress-up? Today, I'll let you indulge. I was forced to wear a ridiculous costume and truly became the clown of the event. The next day, I proudly caught a cold. Accompanied by a low fever, nasal congestion, and a sore throat, I couldn't eat. I originally wanted to go to the hospital for a checkup. But Ethan called me, asking where I was. Nina, have you forgotten who you are? A pursuer must have the awareness of a pursuer. Rose is throwing a tantrum, wanting to eat the latest cake, but it's sold out online and needs to be picked up from the store. You have half an hour to deliver it to my office. I forced myself to swallow all the fever reducers, hemostatics, and cold medicine in one go. Since I had just taken the medicine, I couldn't drive and had to take a taxi. Unfortunately, it started pouring outside. Because of the traffic jam, I couldn't arrive on time and was a few minutes late. I'm sorry, I'm late. I apologized softly. Rose glanced at me disdainfully, seeing that the cake box was splattered with rainwater. She threw it directly at my face. Why are you late? Was it on purpose? Ethan and I were supposed to play a game, but you ruined our mood. Rose's temper flared up suddenly. From getting angry to raising her hand to hit me, it took less than 3 seconds. I made you late, I made you late. I had no strength to dodge, and I took a few slaps, my face burning with pain. Suddenly, she covered her nose again and shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you? Nosebleed again? Why don't you just die? Stay away from me, disgusting." I quickly took out a tissue from my pocket to wipe. Ethan gently stroked Rose's hair, and Rose whimpered a few times, leaning into Ethan's embrace. All right, Rose is not angry anymore. He turned his head, looking at me with a gaze full of disgust. Are you sick? I forced out an ugly smile, and as soon as I opened my mouth, a heavy nasal tone came out. Yeah, I have a bit of a cold. Nina, when are you going to change this terrible habit of ruining the atmosphere? Hurry up and get lost. You always bring the mood down. After going out, the heavy rain showed no signs of stopping. I felt completely limp, suffering terribly. Just as I was about to take a taxi home, I collapsed to the ground. In my dream, time returned to high school. Nina, let's play a game. A few little girls dragged me into the girls' bathroom. They pushed my head into a sink filled with water. You and your mother are both worthless scum. People like you are just disgusting to be alive. Nina, your mother is a piece of trash, why don't you go die? My head was held underwater, and I gradually couldn't catch my breath. I was thrown into the pit of the girls' restroom, covered in filth. In the end, it was Leo. Leo took a hose and washed away all the filth from the girls' restroom and the surrounding area. He pulled me out of the pit, put on my school uniform and let's go home first. I told my mom that I was being bullied at school. She didn't even raise her eyelids and said, "Why don't you look for the reason within yourself? It must be that your behavior is not good, that's why they look down on you." From that day on, I never mentioned being bullied again. The next day, Leo frowned when he saw the new bruise on my face. How did you get bullied again? Those people are really annoying. From that day on, no one bullied me anymore, never again. I struggled painfully in the midst of school violence. But Leo pulled me out and led me towards the light. I hopelessly fell in love with Leo. Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to confess before he passed away in a car accident. I opened my eyes, and everything around me was pure white. It turned out that after fainting, I was taken to the hospital. I lay in the hospital for 3 days, during which Ethan didn't come even once. After being discharged, I bought a bouquet of flowers and went to Leo's grave. On the tombstone, Leo was still wearing his school uniform. He had a smile, his eyes were clear, and the way he looked at people was gentle. My nose tinged with sadness, and tears streamed down my face. Leo, I dreamed of you today. You all look so alike, even when you smile. Several times I almost couldn't tell you apart. So I wrote down his preferences and personality. Occasionally, when he's in a good mood, he will smile at me. Leo, will you blame me? On my way back, I placed a small card on the flower. It was written by Leo. The card said, "Silly, this time I will protect you." On the other end of the phone, Ethan's voice sounded a bit angry. Nina, you actually disappeared. Are you trying to rebel against the heavens? Hurry back. I responded perfunctorily with an Ethan's voice was stiff. Nina, I have indeed neglected you these past few days. I will make it up to you. As soon as I got back, Ethan pulled me into the house. He was careful in his movements, even forgetting to find me disgusting. What, are you still afraid of what I might do to you? Ethan's face was right in front of me, and Leo's face gradually overlapped with Ethan's. I kissed the corner of his lips impulsively. His body stiffened. Ethan slowly leaned down, deepening the kiss. Nina, why do I always feel like something's off with you these past few days? Are you sick and your brain is fried? I shivered all over, suddenly waking up. I asked him impulsively, Ethan, if I left you, would you miss me? Ethan laughed in anger and suddenly pinned me down on the sofa. Nina, what do you think you are? Dare to leave me and try it. I fell silent. Ethan looked down at me, you won't leave me, because you love me madly. Nina, there is no one in this world who loves you more than I do. Ethan thought I was listening, and smiled contentedly. He picked me up and quickly stripped me bare. You look so much like Rose, just right for me to vent my frustrations. I lay beneath him, obedient like a dead fish. I don't know if it's to make up for something, but these days, Ethan has been unusually nice to me. That day, Ethan insisted on taking me along when he went out with Rose. After a few rounds of drinks, Rose was draping herself over Ethan in the car, her voice so sweet it gave me goosebumps. Ethan, I've been so tired lately, my back always hurts. She leaned delicately against Ethan, her gaze floating lightly over to me. She even raised an eyebrow at me with a sense of triumph. The two of them kissed as if no one else was around. I sat there like an outsider, watching them be affectionate. Suddenly, the car shook violently, and I had no time to react. The out-of-control vehicle crashed directly into a large truck in front of us. The accident was so sudden that no one was prepared. My first reaction was that Ethan was still beside me. Rose in the car turned pale with fear. Ah! Help! I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Without hesitation, Ethan lunged forward to protect Rose. He held her tightly, saying, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." I desperately shielded Ethan beside me. In that moment, I heard the sound of bones cracking. The car came to a stop, and I was covered in blood from the shards of glass. A sharp pain shot through my knee, making me break out in a cold sweat. I looked down for a moment, and saw that one of my legs was twisted at an extremely unnatural angle. Blood was gushing out, and the pain was excruciating. Ethan wanted to check my injury, but Rose was so scared that she hugged him tightly. Nina. Ethan. I'm so scared. After Ethan comforted Rose, he realized that I had already fainted from the pain. When I woke up again, I found myself in a hospital. The door suddenly swung open, and Ethan stood at the entrance. The moment he saw me, he froze. You are awake? Ethan got a deep cut on his face from glass shards while trying to protect Rose, leaving a scar. I looked at the scar on his face with disdain, somewhat lost in thought. It seems I have split myself into two people. One is Nina, who is humble to the bone and loves Ethan obsessively. The other is me, who watches this relationship with cold indifference and feels utterly bored. Now Ethan's face finally doesn't resemble Leo's anymore. Since that's the case, I decide to put an end to all my affection. Ethan, let's break up. I said calmly, as if I were stating the most ordinary thing. Nina, what are you saying? Ethan anxiously tried to grab my hand. I quickly dodged, don't touch me. Ethan's arm froze in midair, and he looked at me in disbelief. Perhaps realizing that I was serious this time, Ethan dared not touch me again. The air was filled with a deathly silence. Finally, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. "Nina, what's wrong with you? Why are you throwing a tantrum?" I looked at him calmly and chuckled lightly. "It's nothing, I just suddenly don't like you anymore. People are always like this. They don't cherish what they have until they lose it and then regret it. I used to carefully please Ethan, and he would come and go as he pleased. Now, my sudden indifference has made him restless instead." Ethan's expression was as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. "Do you even know what you're saying? You love me, you've loved me for 10 years, and now you're telling me you don't love me anymore." He seemed to remember something and smiled again, but it was a contemptuous smile, as if he thought my words were not worth mentioning. "I get it, you must be angry because I protected Rose, right? You're jealous now, aren't you?" Ethan started to brainwash me. I really couldn't listen any longer. Ethan seemed convinced that I loved him deeply, so he wouldn't leave at all. "Nina, let me tell you, don't play games. It was you who clung to me desperately back then." I was hurt and really had no energy to argue with him. I simply closed my eyes and ignored him. I was far more awake than Ethan imagined. Ethan never knew that the reason I loved him so fiercely and wanted to protect him was simply because of his face. Ethan stood by my hospital bed for a while, and then his phone rang. It was a call from Rose. She was scared and was still in the hospital. "Ethan, could you please not go see Nina? Could you come and stay with me? I'm so scared," sob sob sob. Ethan seemed a bit hesitant, looked at me deeply, and ultimately left. After Ethan left, I lay quietly alone on the hospital bed. I took out my phone and looked at Ethan's photo again. After seeing it, I deleted everything related to Ethan. I didn't even want to hear his voice anymore. At first, I stubbornly stayed by Ethan's side, being his pursuer for 10 years. But the truth is, Ethan is just Ethan. He can never replace Leo as the white moonlight in my heart. He doesn't deserve so much of my devotion. My best friend Emily came to visit me at the hospital as soon as she returned to the country. "Nina, I haven't been back for half a year. How did you let yourself get into this state? I've told you so many times before, Ethan is just a dog of a man, yet you insist on making yourself so humble. You're such a love fool." Every time I mention Ethan, she scolds me mercilessly. Emily looks at me with concern. She actually doesn't quite believe that I would take the initiative to let go of Ethan. "Nina, are you really okay? You didn't get your brain damaged in this car accident, did you? Don't scare me. Don't curse me." Emily scolded Ethan for half an hour. In the end, she accepted the fact that I don't love Ethan anymore. "For now, I'll just believe that your brain got knocked back to its senses. I'll help you find a new young hunk, all of them 185 centimeters tall, with 8-pack abs and a V-line, guaranteed you'll like them." Thank you." Seeing that I could still joke around, Emily finally relaxed. After my insistence, Emily finally gave up on dragging me to some Sea King party. After liking Ethan for so long, I spent my entire youth on him. Ethan will not suffer any loss. Even if he loses me, there will be other women who will love him one after another. As long as I leave Ethan, I will have everything. However, Emily is right. I should indeed live for myself. Half a month later, my injury had healed significantly. I returned to Ethan's villa, ready to pack my things. "Nina, why are you back?" As soon as I walked into the living room, I saw Rose. She was sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed, displaying an air of a hostess. I merely glanced at her indifferently. After returning, she didn't stop provoking me, boasting repeatedly about how good Ethan was to her in front of me. Unfortunately, I felt no envy at all. I looked at her with a calm expression. Rose has found another way to attack me. "Oh, I see. You still haven't given up, still thinking about being Ethan's suitor, right? I'm about to get engaged to Ethan, so stop dreaming." I made a sarcastic remark and went upstairs. "With a mouth like that, did you spray some new kind of dung?" I returned to my room and looked at everything in it. The familiar furnishings made me feel nauseous. I had no intention of getting entangled with Rose, so after packing what I needed, I left this place. Ethan had been contacting me on Facebook, but I never replied. Eventually, he probably got tired of me and gave up. I didn't expect that when he saw I was moving, he would take the initiative to find me. Ethan was anxious. "Are you so eager to leave me? You don't answer my calls, and you don't reply to my messages." Me, too lazy to reply. Too lazy to reply? You weren't like this before. In the past, whenever he sent me a message, I would reply in seconds. I was blind before, I can't blame myself. Ethan grabbed me and wouldn't let me go. "Have you had enough of this? I've given you an out, and you're still not satisfied?" I looked at him impatiently. "Let go." Ethan was getting angry too. Not letting go. Seeing that he still had no intention of releasing me, I smiled. If he keeps me like this now, he'll probably end up slapping himself in the face soon. "Ethan, I'll be straightforward. I've never liked you from the beginning to the end. Being with you was just treating you as a substitute. So you want to play substitute literature with me, huh? Now it's the backlash of substitute literature. Why is it only allowed for you to have your white moonlight, but not for me?" I looked at him and found it truly ridiculous. All his confidence came from my deep love for him. But now he knows that I don't love him. These few words were like a fuse. Ethan was provoked by me, his eyes bloodshot. "A substitute? Who do you think I am?" I pulled down my collar to show him the words on my collarbone, which had the letter L. "Ethan, you really do look like your brother. Your voice is similar, you look the same, but as a person, there's no comparison. If you didn't have your brother's face, what would you be?" I took a deep breath and said the words I had long wanted to say. Ethan stared at me with a complex expression. "You don't like me, so why did you save me?" I confessed that I saved him simply because of his face. Because of this face, I was willing to be his pursuer for 10 years. Because of this face, no matter how he treated me, I could endure it. Now, this face is ruined. Naturally, I have no reason to stay any longer. After I left, Ethan's mind is inexplicably filled with thoughts of me. The feeling of losing me has left him in a chaotic state. Ethan wants to win me back, but he can't bring himself to do it. In the middle of the night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He was extremely agitated, turning over to grab a cigarette and a lighter. But when he reached out, he found nothing. Ethan suddenly remembered that I used to put these things by his bedside in advance. He turned over, took a sip of alcohol. The spicy liquid going down his throat felt like a small knife cutting at his voice. He realized that I had long since become a part of his life. Ethan took another sip of the wine, only to realize how bitter it was. The place beside him was empty, and Ethan went to look at where I used to sleep. Everything on the bed was neat and tidy, but the person was gone. "Nina. Nina," calling out, but no one answered. Outside, the rain poured down like his terrible mood at that moment. Ethan always believed that life could run normally even if someone was missing. It wasn't until I left him that he realized it wasn't true. His life began to fall apart. In the past, every day he would wake up to a hot meal. In the wardrobe, there were all the clothes I had picked out, washed, dried, and warmed for him. I always made sure to pack his business trip clothes the day before he left. The documents he usually needs for work are all organized by me and placed in his office. Even the coffee he drinks while working is ground by my own hands. After I left, no one helped him with these things anymore. He then realized that, unknowingly, I had become his habit. It turned out that he had already fallen in love with me. Rose was very upset to see Ethan change his attitude in just a few days. "Ethan, why can't you marry me? Do you not love me anymore?" Rose bit her lower lip, tears welling up in her eyes. She was reluctant to give up on Ethan, this prized catch. Especially after Ethan got hurt on his face, she felt that the possibility of me and Ethan was even more unlikely. Rose thought that now was the best time for her to take her place. Ethan stared blankly out the window, not even noticing as Rose began to undress. Rose had originally intended to use her beauty to seduce him, but found that Ethan wasn't paying her any attention at all. She felt a bit flustered and moved in front of Ethan, stripping off all her clothes. "Don't bother me." Ethan, irritated, pushed Rose away, who was clinging to him like a stubborn adhesive. Rose fell to the ground, utterly embarrassed. Ethan closed his eyes, his mind filled with thoughts of me. "Just seeing you makes me sick. Don't come looking for me again." Ethan issued an eviction order, and Rose was completely panicked. "Why? Can't you see my efforts for you? Aside from looking like me, what does Nina have that I don't?" Rose didn't believe it and rushed over to hug Ethan. Ethan pushed her away in disgust, saying, "You can't even compare to Nina. You're nowhere near her level." Ethan didn't want to deal with Rose, but she stubbornly refused to leave. Unable to tolerate it any longer, Ethan directly ordered the butler to throw her out. Before long, the news of Rose and Ethan's falling out spread through high society. After a few days of feeling dejected, Ethan made a decision. He wanted to find me and sincerely apologize, hoping to make amends and keep me. Ethan searched the places I used to frequent, but he couldn't find me anywhere. He asked my friends about me, but I didn't have any friends at all. After all, my heart had been filled with thoughts of him. Where would I have found other friends? Later, he sought out my best friend multiple times. Emily was somewhat annoyed by him and directly shouted at him, "Ethan, is this really interesting to you? Nina used to be completely devoted to you, but you treated her like someone else's substitute and mistreated her like that. Don't forget how Nina broke her leg. She felt that someone like Ethan, who was so ungrateful, should be chopped up and fed to the dogs." Emily's words completely awakened Ethan. He finally realized that he had been mistreating me all these years. And I have completely given up on him. "However, Nina also saw you as a substitute, so weren't you also being loved under the identity of a substitute?" Emily looked at him as if he were a joke. "Tell me, where is she?" Ethan spoke for the first time in a pleading tone. Emily looked at him deeply but did not tell him. Later, Ethan still found me. At the moment he found me, he felt that all his persistence and effort had meaning. "Nina, I was wrong. Can you give me another chance? What do I have to do for you to forgive me?" Ethan stood outside the villa in the rain all day, humbly begging me. I was unmoved by his words, even finding them quite ironic. No matter how long he stood in the rain, I would not soften my heart again. I no longer love him, that is a fact. Ethan was relentless, standing outside my villa every day, come rain or shine. During that time, there were several heavy downpours, yet he refused to leave. One day, he was drenched in rain all night and collapsed at my villa's doorstep. The bodyguard came to ask if I wanted to send him to the hospital. I stood at the door, silent for a long time. Then I slowly shook my head, no need. He had only lost me, it wasn't as if he was dying. At first, the bodyguards would chase him away, but later, they couldn't be bothered with him anymore. That day, Emily suddenly screamed in surprise. "Holy crap! Nina, look." Emily excitedly held her phone up in front of me. Entertainment News has pushed a new video, the domineering CEO becomes a suitor. The richest young master in the city has been waiting for the heartless woman for months, but why? In the video, the rain is pouring down. Ethan's body is drenched, looking so fragile that it makes one feel pity. Anyone who sees it would sigh at how deeply he feels. Anyone who sees it would think I am that heartless and cold-blooded woman. Ha ha ha, he looks like a big abandoned puppy, really so pitiful. By the way, that woman is too heartless, clearly, such a handsome boyfriend, and she just says no and walks away. Netizens are indignant and stand up for Ethan, calling for me to turn back quickly. He just made the mistake that all men make, it's not a crime deserving of death. Please, this sister, have a soft heart, Ethan is really so pitiful. Not a single person is blaming Ethan, they are all blaming me. They even dug up my personal information and exposed it widely on the internet. From the very beginning, they called me heartless and cold-blooded, and later maliciously speculated that I was a gold digger, juggling multiple relationships. There were even worse things said about me, claiming my private life was disreputable and that I had been ill. All kinds of foul language came pouring in, and I couldn't suppress it. Even Ethan's so-called wealthy friends couldn't stand it anymore. They came to persuade him for several days in a row. Ethan, there are plenty of fish in the sea. If you ask me, Rose isn't bad either. Ethan, how could you fall for a woman like this? Just playing around is one thing, but you really treat her like a wife? Ethan slapped him directly, his eyes filled with malice. You dare say another word? Get the hell out of here. The man was so scared that he wet himself and no longer dared to speak. After this incident, no one ever dared to advise him again. Recently, the voices criticizing me online have been increasing. Ethan couldn't take it anymore, so he took the initiative to hold a press conference to clarify the news. Today, I want to clarify the recent news online. No matter what you say, that is my personal behavior and has nothing to do with Nina. I hope everyone will stop cyberbullying her, it's all my fault. If you want to scold someone, scold me. All I ask is for Nina to forgive me now. He smiled bitterly, staring longingly at the doorway. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. I actually don't care at all about the news online. It's just a bit annoying. After the press conference, Ethan still stood guard outside my villa every day. But unlike before, he had become a shell of himself, disheveled and unkempt, with a scruffy beard. That day, I simply couldn't hold back any longer and took the initiative to find him. Nina, as long as you come back, I am willing to do anything for you. He slightly raised his head, revealing a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The people nearby jeered with schadenfreude. Nina, don't be too much. Ethan is begging you like this, just show a little mercy. I laughed. I want to see a dog bark. The air momentarily froze. I looked at him sarcastically, my smile deepening little by little. Aren't you the one who loves admirers the most? Since you like dogs, why not learn to bark like one? If you bark nicely, I will forgive you. I stared at him quietly, and he continued to look at me in silence. After a long while, just when I thought he wouldn't agree, he barked. Woof. Woof woof. Ethan ultimately lost his mind, moving closer to me while wagging his tail in a pleading manner, truly resembling a dog. Everyone laughed at him, laughed at his foolishness, laughed at his degradation. Ethan's eyes turned red, his voice trembling fiercely. Can you forgive me now? I learned to like dogs, just for you. Now he was humble to the core. Just as I once humbly begged him to love me. I let out a light laugh. You call out well, but you really make me feel quite disgusted. I smiled indifferently, not wanting to get entangled with him any longer. That night, I quietly left. I left City A, leaving Ethan and everything about that city behind. I began to focus on my career, relying on my own abilities, struggling and striving, and became the president of a large company. I achieved my financial independence. When Ethan learned of my departure, he completely fell into madness. The city of A and even all the cities across the country went crazy searching for my shadow. He was almost driven mad, repeating my name every day. Each night, he was overwhelmed with regret. He even sincerely turned to Buddhism, taking refuge in the Buddha, almost to the point of shaving his head to become a monk. Ethan was like a paranoid man. The more he couldn't have it, the more he wanted it. I listened quietly as my best friend shared these gossip stories with me. Imagining what Ethan must be like now, I couldn't help but chuckle softly. It feels so satisfying. Just like my name, Nina. May you never forget me, Nina, and let Ethan suffer through each day. I thought that Ethan and I would never cross paths again in this lifetime. But I didn't expect that we would meet again 2 years later. I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctor told me I had at most 3 months left. I smiled. It wasn't a big deal, after all, I had nothing to lose. My best friend Emily cried uncontrollably when she heard the news. We can get treatment, we have money, we can bring in the best doctors from around the world, we can definitely cure this. I smiled and patted her hair. It's useless. But Emily cried intermittently, holding on to my hand tightly. Since there was no hope anyway, I might as well leave with some dignity. Rose cried, threw a tantrum, and threatened to hang herself to force Ethan to marry her. The Liu family unilaterally agreed, compelling Ethan to get married. I never expected that the day Ethan married Rose would happen to be my birthday. The wedding was exceptionally grand, but everyone could see that the groom had no smile at all. He was completely enveloped in a sense of gloom. Emily stood up for me, insisting on causing a scene at the wedding. How dare you two shameless lovers get married? Ethan, are you particularly happy? Nina was killed because of you, and you won't have a good end. Emily angrily cursed, completely disregarding her image. In an instant, Ethan suddenly looked up and rushed towards her. What did you just say? Clarify your words, what do you mean she died, how did she die? His dark eyes were swirling with intense emotions, resembling fear and despair. Emily couldn't hold back any longer and blurted everything out. Ethan froze upon hearing it, unable to come to terms with it for a long time. Nina, can you tell me where she is now? Emily pointed to a hospital address in the east of the city. Ethan, like a lone wolf, rushed out impatiently. He left Rose right there at the wedding, not looking back. Rose stood alone on the stage, feeling utterly humiliated, repeatedly screaming, Ethan, come back, don't forget today is our wedding. How could you leave me all alone? But Ethan didn't turn back at all. Rose went mad, the grand wedding was lively for others but desolate for her. Ethan was frantic, he rushed to the hospital and found the room where I was staying. However, he arrived a bit too late. The room was empty, and he had missed seeing me for the last time. He sat on the ground in despair, murmuring my name, Nina. Please come back. That look was both pitiful and laughable. I had long been dead, my love dissipating like the mountain moon, leaving only my corpse lying in the coffin. Emily arranged the funeral for me, she couldn't bear to look. But she still told me that my suitor Ethan had come. The man, dressed in black, knelt before my urn, crying and laughing, laughing and crying. In the end, he fainted. They all said Ethan had gone mad because when he woke up, he babbled crazily, my Nina is dead. Nina. I won't marry Rose anymore, will you wake up? I was wrong, I was really wrong. Nina, I love you, I love you. He searched for me like a madman, causing a scene like a madman. Every day he called my name. He didn't even care that he would die in the next second. Later, he was diagnosed with cancer, the same illness I had. Ethan died at the age of 27. Before he died, he whispered, Nina. I envy my brother. Ethan felt guilty towards Nina in this life. Soon, everything about us was dug up. The gossiping netizens discovered that the famous philanthropist Nina had passed away. I became famous again, but in a different way. As for Rose, she really knows how to put on an act, fooling everyone around her. The truth is, she wasn't pregnant, she just wanted to reap the benefits. Originally, when the rumor said Ethan was going to marry Rose, she was quite pleased with herself, bragging everywhere. But when Ethan had that incident, she instantly became the target of everyone's scorn. In the end, she was abandoned by her family. Rose fell into destitution, becoming a beggar, wandering the streets, living day by day in a filthy and disheveled state. When she was hungry, she would rummage through the trash bins by the roadside, hoping to find some leftover food from kind-hearted people. When she was tired, she would make do with a night on a park bench or in an alley at the street corner. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her clothes were not just torn but also filthy. In these times, people walked the streets dressed quite simply, and not many would intentionally throw her some money. Occasionally, someone would toss her 5 or 8 yuan, which was just a drop in the bucket for her. Especially recently, the enforcement by the city management had become increasingly strict, and she could no longer sleep on the streets. The money she had was dwindling, and the places she could go were becoming fewer. She died one morning, there had been a heavy rain the night before, and the next morning, the sanitation workers discovered Rose's body. According to their description, Rose was killed by a group of thugs who assaulted her. Before her death, she was still fantasizing about being able to rise to the branches and become a phoenix, but in reality, she was just a mere clown. Ethan, who was diagnosed with cancer, lay on the hospital bed filled with regret. Since then, it seemed as if Ethan had entered a state of delirium. Every day he either sat in a wheelchair or hunched over. For him, even the ability to take care of himself was a luxury. He cried like a child, feeling as if his life was fading away. Ethan began to give up on treatment, spending every day in that empty room. The scenes from the past played in his mind like a movie. They were all about Nina. Ethan's heart ached to the point of cramping. The last words that accompanied him flashed through his mind. In this life, Ethan felt he had wronged Nina. Some pain can only be understood at the very last moment of life, and perhaps this is Ethan's way of atonement. Nina, Nina, I call your name. I want to tell you that in this life, I love you. Once, I was filled with anxiety and hurt you. If there is a next life, tell me earlier, I came too late. As long as you wave to me, I will definitely run to you.